welcome to the Book Fair, Children's Literature for Grown-Ups. I'm Anthony, and this week for the podcast, we have an interview with author Linda Sue Park, founder of KiBooka and advisory board member for We Need Diverse Books. Park will be discussing her new book, Gracie Under the Waves. As well as, in the news this week, we have the future of children's book selling, a grim look at the state of reading in America, and recent ransomware attacks on libraries. First, from Publishers Weekly, the future of children's book selling. In times of change, the future of children's book selling arguably lies in how stores have refined or reinterpreted long-standing programs such as author events, book fairs, and subscription book boxes for a new generation. To find out more about the innovative solutions that some stores have taken, we took a closer look at the approaches of 6 very different independent bookstores. They include one of the country's oldest, Books Inc., which is headquartered in San Leandro, California, and dates back to 1851 and the California Gold Rush, as well as the 6-year-old Silver Unicorn in Action, Massachusetts, both of which have experimented with non-profit book fairs and book festivals for middle graders, respectively. Other stores like Copperfield's Books, headquartered in Sebastopol, California, offer kids chances to meet big-name children's authors and illustrators over pizza dinners. For close to a decade, the Country Bookshop in Southern Pines, North Carolina, has been giving away books to kids in rural areas who have never visited a bookstore. And 38-year-old Children's Book World in Los Angeles, one of the oldest children's specialty bookstores in the country, has found a way to make virtual author visits work, despite many of their colleagues giving up. In addition, 13-year-old Parnassus Books in Nashville boasts a successful YA subscription box program that continues to draw new readers. It also predates national and international subscription boxes like Owl Crate, Monthly Book Box, and Fairy Loot Fantasy Book Box subscriptions. The article goes into some greater detail about more programs done by other independent bookshops across the country. I recommend checking out the full article linked at patreon.com/thebookfair. You can follow the Patreon for free. None of the resources will be locked behind any payments. However, if you do wish to contribute with a monthly subscription, that would be greatly appreciated. Next up, a brief look at an article from The Atlantic, The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books. Nicholas Dames has taught literature humanities, Columbia University's required great books course, since 1998. He loves the job, but it has changed. Over the past decade, students have become overwhelmed by the reading. College students have never read everything they're assigned, of course, but this feels different. Dames' students now seem bewildered by the thought of finishing multiple books a semester. His colleagues have noticed the same problem. Many students no longer arrive at college, or even at highly selective elite colleges, prepared to read books. This development puzzled Dames until one day during the fall 2022 semester, when a first-year student came to his office hours to share how challenging she had found early assignments. Literature humanities often requires students to read a book, sometimes a very long and dense one, in just a week or two. But the student told Dames that at her public high school, she had never been required to read an entire book. She had been assigned excerpts, poetry, and news articles, but not a single book cover to cover. My jaw dropped, Dames told me. The anecdote helped explain the change he was seeing in his students. It's not that they don't want to do the reading. It's that they don't know how. Middle and high schools have stopped asking them to. The article will go on in greater detail, and there will be further resources linked on the Patreon page if you're interested. Lastly, from publiclibrariesonline.org, ransomware attacks at libraries, how they happen, what to do. Malicious hacking attacks of institutions are on the rise, particularly after the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Corporations, including nonprofits like public libraries, face greater dangers from these attacks. Ransomware is the name of a particular type of cyber attack where hackers encrypt a victim's files, then demand a ransom to give users access to their files. The demand is often in cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. Susan Sentz, the director of Northampton Public Library in Northampton, Pennsylvania, led the response to a ransomware attack on her library in late 2020. Sentz said that while she had heard about ransomware attacks on the news, she hadn't considered her library particularly high risk. In November 2020, as Sentz and her staff went through their morning routine, they noticed errors logging onto personal workstations and their catalog. Quote, "We decided something may be wrong with our server or that something was updating, so we contacted the IT company we use. They were having problems trying to remote into our servers, which was the first red flag. Then a staff member noticed that the files on her computer were encrypted, which we relayed to our IT company. And that was when we knew it was a ransomware attack." End quote. The result? Closure for 2 weeks as their IT firm sorted out the malware problems. Because of COVID-19 related closures and rescheduling, Northampton thankfully didn't see a huge disruption to their work. But lending was out of the question with the catalog down. Mark Sandblade, who has spent 6 years as Information Technology Manager at the Library System of Lancaster County, said that ransomware is a significant concern for the modern public library and, in his opinion, the greatest IT security threat he faces. Sandblade explained his worries as a matter of risk and probability, saying, quote, "Ransomware is one of the few risks that is both highly probable and impactful. Weekly news headlines of successful ransomware attacks that have debilitated whole companies and organizations are fairly common now." End quote. Libraries are at a higher risk than other organizations for a few reasons, according to Sandblade. First, libraries rely heavily on layers of IT infrastructure like electronic catalogs, public Wi-Fi access, and public computing terminals. IT budgets at public libraries are not as comprehensive as in other organizations. Some public libraries benefit from their small size and less complicated infrastructure, giving hackers less places to infiltrate. But they might not have the resources to set up adequate defenses against hacking. Sandblade said that the consortium model of the Library System of Lancaster County can be helpful in order to take advantage of the pooled resources and economies of scale. Again, the full article will be listed at patreon.com/thebookfair. If you are interested in cybersecurity details, I would recommend just doing common sense things like ensuring that you do not open any suspicious links or download any attachments from email addresses that you do not find trustworthy without doing a privacy scan first. Gmail and Microsoft Office will have ways for you to report suspicious emails if you are unsure, and sometimes will even let you know if it is found to be phishing. Next up, with recent releases, The Hill, Inside the Secret World of the U.S. Capitol, by Kate Andersen Bauer. Taking up more than 1.5 million square feet and boasting more than 600 rooms, plus its own subway system, barbershop, and dining options, the U.S. Capitol proves a fascinating subject in this cutaway-feeling view of its inner workings by Andersen Bauer. In 3 parts, rendered in meticulous detail, the author covers the building's development, staff, and significance, beginning with its initial construction, which was completed by more than 200 enslaved laborers in 1793. Chapters relating the complicated ins and outs of running this small city highlight individuals like Darrell Chappell, who was the conductor of the Senate subway for 44 years. Later sections describe occasions and legislators who have made history within its walls, such as Hiram Revels, the first black senator, and Barney Frank, who in 1987 became the first member of Congress to come out as gay. To showcase how the Capitol has been the site of important moments throughout history, Andersen Bauer additionally spotlights 5 incredible days on Capitol Hill from 1814 to 2021. Archival photos bring the Capitol to life, reminding readers that understanding the past helps us make sense of where we are today. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. The next new release is Keeper Chance and the Conundrum of Chaos, Evil Villains International League #1 by Alex Evanovich. 16-year-old Keeper Chance, who has a knack for intuitive tinkering and lives with his grandmother, is doing his best to adopt a slacker persona and fly under the radar at school. Then he's recruited by Chaos, head of Chapter 626 of Evil Villains International League, an organization described as necessary evil. Quote, "We're the sock that goes missing in the dryer. We're the kid who won't stop screaming on the plane." Keeper joins fellow recruit Toby, a talented hacker with the exceptional hearing and smell, in pulling off a daring cookie heist, essential for initiation, only to stumble across a truly villainous kidnapping scheme. Together with Y, daughter of the mysterious do-gooder Sensei Love, Keeper must thwart this abduction ploy and claim his place among his new community. Ivanovich's debut, a tongue-in-cheek take on comic book tropes, features a quirky cast with mundane oddball powers such as talking down prices or sucking the fun out of any situation. The villains barely tip the scales past petty nuances, making this a pleasantly goofy story and a satisfying beginning to Keeper's adventures, with plenty of room for further exploration. This book is recommended for ages 10 and up. The final recommendation for this week is Sylvia Doe and the 100-Year Flood by Robert Beatty. Amnesiac 13-year-old Sylvia Doe has considered high ground home for children in the North Carolina mountains her safe haven since she was found by high ground staff at age 4. As a devout naturalist, she feels uneasy anywhere else. She's run away from every foster home she's been placed in, returning faithfully to high ground. Upon fleeing from another foster family during a hurricane, she discovers a flooded river that has morphed into a once-in-a-lifetime 100-year flood. Things that have no place in the present, such as a long-extinct animal, appears along the river's current, as well as 13-year-old Jorna Grant, who has been carried far from home. When Sylvia rescues him, the pair soon realize that the solution to ending the flood may lie in getting Jorna home. But in the process, Sylvia could lose high ground. Beatty pays tribute to the beauty and dangers of the natural world in this thoughtful tale. Sensorial descriptions focusing on Sylvia's love for her surroundings and passions for observing the environment mixed with pulse-pounding action to craft a quietly magical adventure about finding where one belongs. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Coming up next is an interview with author Linda Sue Park about her book Gracie Under the Waves and her work as a member of the advisory board for We Need Diverse Books and founder of KiBooka. But first, if you are interested in the work done here on the podcast, there are a couple of very simple ways you can help out. First, you can review or rate the podcast wherever you are listening now. You can also share the podcast with any educators or young readers or friends in your life. And lastly, you can follow the podcast on social media, either Facebook, Threads, or Instagram at BookFairPod. You can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair and find an extensive list of resources used whenever creating an episode. You will not need to pay to access any of these resources on the Patreon, though any subscriptions would be greatly appreciated to help the podcast grow. Now, let's move on to an interview with Linda Sue Park. Hello, Linda Sue. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing really good today. Thank you. To start off the interview, can you just give the audience a little bit about yourself and your new book, Gracie Under the Waves?
Happy to do so. I am the author of more than 30 titles for young readers. They include the 2002 Newbery Medal book, A Single Shard, and also the perpetual, I'm happy to say, New York Times bestseller, A Long Walk to Water. Those are probably two of my better-known books. I've also written 2 books in the 39 Clues series, which is very popular with young readers. And my latest title is called Gracie Under the Waves, It is the story of a girl named Gracie who loves to snorkel, and she finds out through her love of snorkeling that the planet's coral reefs are terribly endangered. And she wonders if there's anything she, as an ordinary kid, who in fact lives in a landlocked state, can do to help the coral crisis.
And Gracie, as you said, lives in a landlocked state, and her passion for snorkeling is one of the things that drives her to the waters and leads her to this passion for activism. But it also shows that these issues are far-reaching and are not just limited to coastal regions, right?
Absolutely. And Gracie's journey parallels my own in so many ways. I grew up in Illinois, also landlocked. I now live in New York State, but I live in the western portion of the state, which is hundreds of miles from the ocean. Unlike Gracie, I did not get to snorkel for the first time until I was an adult. I was in my 20s. I put on the mask, I put in the snorkel, I looked into the water, and I was astounded by what I saw, just instantly hooked. Told myself within the first 10 seconds, I am going to try to do this as much as I can, as often as I can, for the rest of my life. And pretty much that's what I've spent the last 40 years doing, is trying to arrange my life so that I can go on vacation in places where I can snorkel. So I gave many of those characteristics, that love of snorkeling, to Gracie, and am so fortunate in so many ways to write for young readers who are often so passionate about certain causes, especially with regards to animals or the planet, and who are not yet jaded by, hopeless despair. They're enthusiastic, and they're ready to work.
Right, and young people are usually so passionate about nature and animals as well as other social issues. And do you feel that it's this kind of draw towards the beauty of nature and the purity of animals and the environment that kind of leads to a natural inclination towards conservation and fighting against climate change?
That's a really good question. I guess the affinity between children and animals is a natural. They're both mysteries to the adult world and are sort of naturally drawn to each other. But I have found that when I go into the schools to talk about this book, I first show many photos of the wonderful things that I have seen snorkeling, and kids are just immediately drawn in and attracted by that. And then I go on to show them photos of what happens when a coral reef dies. And the sadness and the indignant reaction in the room is palpable. And I think that that kind of enthusiasm of young readers, of young people, is this incredible unmined resource. They have this enthusiasm and power that we don't take enough advantage of. And when they decided they get to care about something, they are moved to action. And the main action that they're moved to is nagging their adults to get off their duffs and do something. And they have a terrific ability to do that. And so that is what I'm hoping will happen with Gracie Under the Waves. There are obviously 100 million great causes in the world, and people give their time and money and energy to all sorts of things. And it's great that people have so many interests and passions and things they want to support. But in my opinion, the planet should be on everyone's list, and it should be near the top of everyone's list. Because if there is no planet, what's the point of anything else? And it seems to me that in addition to their affinity for animals, young people sense this. They sense that they're going to be around here longer than we are, and they want the world to be in good shape for them.
And you mentioned that Gracie wants to snorkel. She bugs her parents to travel to the beach to experience the ocean herself, and that's one of the things that leads her to wanting to become an active participant in the fight against climate change. And other than pestering adults, well, pestering is probably not the right word. I'm thinking of pester power, which is a marketing term. Other than convincing adults, what are some ways that children can become active in these kinds of social issues?
Well, I tell young readers that one of the most powerful forces in the world is the power of story. Once you hear someone else's story, they will never again be a faceless block or a member of a group that you stereotype. They will be an individual to you by knowing their stories. Stories connect people. And what young people can do is to learn about the issues they care about passionately and then to talk about them to anybody who will sit still long enough. So one of the examples I use is that there was a terrible coral die-off in 2018 in which 97% of the elkhorn and staghorn coral in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico died off. And I asked the kids to look out the window or to think about the route between their home and their school and what it would be like if 97% of all the plants and trees died. People would be hysterical. They would be like, what is going on? This is terrible. We need these trees to breathe. We need plants to eat and to beautify our homes. And God, what is going on? And there would be an immediate outcry, and there would be an immediate urgent hunt for a solution. Well, when 97% of the coral died, nobody saw it. Hardly anybody saw it. So there was no outcry and no urgency, which there should have been, because the health of the coral reefs is related to the health of the oceans, which is related to all of us, no matter where you live. The health of the oceans is crucial to the health of the planet. So I said, people need to be able to see. They need to be able to see this horrible thing that is happening under the waves. They can't. Being able to snorkel is a huge privilege. There are many people who will never be able to. You can read Gracie and you can share that story. You can share the story that the coral is in big trouble and we need to do something to help. And that is something anybody can do, even if you don't have a dime to your name. You can tell a story. So that's what I hope young people will do.
And you mentioned the power of stories and young readers reading about Gracie and what is happening in the real world. Whenever people think of children's literature or any kind of media targeting young audiences, there tends to be this idea that goes along with that. But seeing the trends of recent books of especially with middle grade fiction, you see a lot of grounded stories, a lot of stories that take place in the real world that reflect the state of the world, similar to with Gracie and the state of coral reefs. And so when it comes to reflecting the world and broadening people's knowledge of the world around them and the people that write them, these are coming from real voices and real people. And that was a really good segue that I completely botched into talking about KiBooka, the kids' books by Korean Americans, which you founded, correct?
That's right. When I began my career 25 years ago in children's literature, I could literally count the number of Korean or Korean American creators of children's books here in the U.S. on one hand. Right? And things have been slowly changing over the years for the better in a greater variety and diversity of children's book creators. And now I'm proud to say that KiBooka is a listing of more than 60, and I know I'm missing a lot. So if you are a Korean American creator of kids' books, please go to the KiBooka website, KiBooka.com, and sign up to share your work with people. It's a great resource for teachers, librarians, for people looking to broaden and deepen their book collections. Because when you meet a character that's like you in a book, there's so many powerful messages that you get. The book is saying, I see you. The book is saying, you matter. Your stories are important enough for literature. And the book is saying, you're not alone. There are other people like you. Those are incredible messages. And it is heartbreaking to think of the generations and generations of young readers who did not meet a character like themselves in books. They had to do a lot of imaginative work to put themselves into the shoes of characters. And they did it. We all did it. You do. It's a leap of faith or a leap of imagination. But now there are so many more books that allow a greater variety of readers to have that incredible experience. And just as important, for mainstream or majority readers to get those same messages. Yes, people from marginalized communities, they have stories too. Their stories are important. They are as important as your stories, right? So all of that connecting that goes on through children's books. For young people, reading children's books is a safe place to practice life. Life is hard, and we all need all the practice we can get. So children's books as a place to practice life, to face difficult issues, to meet people who aren't like us. It's a wonderful way to practice that life and get better at it.
Right. Practicing life. I always like to say it also as empathy is a muscle that needs stretching. So when you're looking into these characters, it's giving you an idea of a different perspective. And 25 years ago, as you said, when you started writing children's literature, not to come out as like a personal attack, 25 years ago, I was reading children's literature as the target audience. And at that time, the idea of inclusivity in books was writing characters as racially ambiguous so that the reader could put themselves in that position. And myself, as someone who is partially Latinx American and Native American, I didn't get that. I didn't do that. I pictured characters as white. Yeah. So seeing a push for explicit representation of different cultural groups has been such a wonderful thing to see recently. Is that something that you're seeing as a member of the board for We Need Diverse Books?
Yes, definitely. I mean, first of all, there have been people doing this work for a long time, but they were working in such isolation, and their books often didn't get out into the world the way they should have. And they fought against forces that were 10 times more powerful than they are now, and we are all standing on their shoulders. So sometimes people say, oh, there were no books for children, blah, blah. And there were people doing incredible work, but we didn't find out about them. On the Native side, for example, Virginia Driving Huxnell is a name that not many people know, and she was doing incredible work for young readers way back when. So we stand on their shoulders now, and the whole movement got an incredible push in 2014, 2015, when Ellen O began a social media viral hashtag called We Need Diverse Books. And that has grown into a 501c3 organization that I am a member of the advisory board. I'm very proud to be a member. It has visibly and substantially affected the number of books for young readers that are coming from diverse creators and featuring diverse characters. That said, we still have a long way to go. We still have a long way to go, and our library shelves need to reflect the population of the U.S. I mean, it's not a one-on-one thing, but we're changing as a nation, and our bookshelves need to reflect that. So it's a slow process, and I myself get pretty impatient. I want things to happen a lot faster than they are, but just because things are happening too slowly to suit me doesn't mean that you give up. You have to keep at it.
Right, and it you can almost trace it to the idea of a work of fiction needing to have broad appeal, and that idea of broad appeal kind of just fleshes out, kind of just washes out any sense of cultural diversity. And seeing it change in the last 10 years has been remarkable. And I agree, we do need our shelves to represent America and represent the culture. And it's almost like a barometer of where society is going, because you start to see the social issues that young readers care about, and not even just young readers, but young adults that are instilling those values in their children.
You touched on something really important there, and part of it is definitely broad appeal. But the publishing industry, especially that of the major publishers centered in New York City, was majority, like vastly, overwhelmingly majority white for a very, very long time. And that is because it is a very poorly paid industry, especially when you're starting out. And therefore, you cannot live in New York City on what publishing pays you. You need usually family help. And that meant middle and upper class white people populating publishing. Now, I can't blame them for responding to stories that appeal to them. That's what we all do, right? But that meant that for decades, publishing children's books was determined by white middle class editors. And that's all there were. And so that's what we got, book after book after book, thousands of books every year. So one of the things that was very important to me to work on in We Need Diverse Books is I'm actually chair of the internship committee. I want to put diverse people into the business of publishing. Many of We Need Diverse Books' other programs focus on the creator side, which is fantastic. We have grants and other programs, mentorships to help creators, writers, and illustrators. But I told Ellen when I signed up, I want to work on the publishing side. Because if we don't do that in tandem, if we don't get people who look differently in the halls of the New York City Publishing House, those creators that you're supporting are going to have difficulty getting their books published and marketed properly and sold and out there. So working on the publishing side to increase the diversity of publishing employees was very important to me.
That's incredible. I started off working in children's theater, which that career unfortunately took a downturn about 4 years ago when COVID-19 came around. That's kind of why I'm here today doing this. And I can say for sure that outreach to young people that are still in high school and starting college to get them to volunteer or join internship programs really drives the workforce for these industries. Yes. You want to make sure that as the labor force in these, and this is getting very technical here, and I'm sorry about that, but as the people in charge of this microcosm of just the theater I worked for, as these people were getting older, you could see this almost conservative shift of what they were presenting. And it wasn't until those internship programs really broadened that we saw things become more diverse within the company, and we saw that shift happen. You had said that the industries were majority white people, white men, and even some of my favorite books that I read as a child were 100% written by authors that lacked any kind of diverse voice or any kind of diversity among writers or editors. And even though I grew up loving those books, in this journey of me doing this podcast, I have discovered so many amazing authors and books that I would have never known about because I had just grown up knowing of these very specific and very popular, highly advertised authors who were all just white men.
Yes, yeah, that's true. In the editorial halls of New York City, for the children's business, it was mostly white women, but your point is totally well taken. It reflects, as you said, our society as a whole, whether that's children's theater or, the halls of corporate America, that we need to get diversity at every single level, every single angle, every single facet. Because focusing on one facet only is not going to move the needle enough. So we find that creators of color need an editor of color, a marketer of color, people who understand the communities that they're writing for, and that it has booksellers of color. We needed librarians, teachers. We need them all through the system. So it's just not just writing children's books. It's trying to change the world, and that's pretty tough work.
Right, and it comes down to it's a very dividing term in America today, but diversity, equity, and inclusion is almost like a necessary evil, where we are as a industry having to put in these programs, forcing these upper levels to consider different voices. It's a necessary evil in that there should theoretically be a point where we don't need those programs, where it's just naturally reflecting the culture and the cultural makeup and the diversity of the country naturally.
That's for sure. I mean, it is a change, and often change is scary for people, and change is especially scary for people who think they're going to lose something by the change. It is difficult to convince them that you're actually not going to lose something, you're going to gain something. That a diverse world, a diverse marketplace, a diverse everything has been shown time and time again to benefit everyone, right? And somehow it's been very difficult to get certain parts of the population to believe that. They think it's a zero-sum game where they're going to lose something and someone else is going to gain something, and that's not how it works. It works that, raising people up raises everybody.
Yes.
Yes.
This has been a very lovely conversation, and I love getting into this deeper side of things, and I really appreciate the conversation about the industry side of things as well. I do also, Linda Sue, like to close out the interview by asking every author this question, so feel free to answer in any way you see fit. You can take as much time as you'd like for this, but Linda Sue, how do you describe yourself and the work that you do as an author?
Wow, what a great question. I'll put it this way. Sometimes I'm in spaces like, for example, conferences or workshops that are for both writers of children's books and writers of adult books. And in those situations, children's authors are very patronized and condescended to. A question I often get is, "Oh, you write books for kids. That's so cute. When are you going to write a real book?" Well, I do write real books, right? And it used to really tick me off to get questions like that and to get that attitude from people who write for adults. And over the years, I've hopefully acquired some wisdom. And now I have to say that I kind of pity them because they have no idea. First of all, we have the best fans in the world, children's authors do. I get so much mail from kids who love my books. I don't think very many adult writers, even if they're very moved by a book, take the trouble to write to the author, but kids do that. Authors of children's books get to write the books that people remember their whole lives. You can ask an 80-year-old, "What was your favorite book when you were a kid?" And they remember. Sometimes adults don't remember a book they read 6 months ago. We get to write the books that people remember all their lives. What is better than that as an author, right? So I feel like what I want to say to people who write for adults, what I am doing is creating your future market. If they don't read me now, they're not going to read you in 10 or 20 years. I am creating your fan base. You should, instead of condescending to me, you should be down on your knees worshiping me. That's what I would like adult authors to know. And it's just, I have to say that it might have been kind of accidental. I didn't know I was going to end up with a 25-year career writing for kids, but I can't imagine a better job in the world. I get to use stories to connect with people. And, what could be better than that?
That has been an interview with Linda Sue Park. You can find her new book, Gracie Under the Waves, wherever books are sold. You can also learn more about her at lindasuepark.com. I also recommend checking out kids' books by Korean Americans at KiBooka.com, KiBooka.com, and looking at We Need Diverse Books at diversebooks.org. This has been another episode of The Book Fair, Children's Literature for Grown-Ups. I greatly appreciate you for listening, and as always, I'll talk at you next time.